right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Right up now, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Now.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Right About Now podcast. This is John Small. Well, happy New Year to you. So excited to embark on this new year. Lots of exciting new opportunities and journeys and adventures. My goodness, I'm starting to use words that AI likes. Well, that's kind of apropos because I decided to start this year off with the topic which I think is the most salient and urgent issue facing writers and creatives, and dare I say, really pretty much any professional living today, and that is generative AI. I'm talking about tools such as ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, Perplexity AI, and tools that we don't even know exist that we'll probably find out about this year. And I think many of us, certainly people that I talk to, view generative AI as an existential threat to their livelihood. And I get it. I mean, it is a powerful technology that is fast and adaptable and just always seems to be getting better every single day. I mean, how do we keep up with this technology? And I personally use it every day. I use it to brainstorm. I use it to research. I use it to outline. It's incredible at summarizing long pieces of text. And while I still think AI is a really crappy writer, I do think it is an amazing collaborator and writing partner. And so I have chosen to embrace this technology. And that might be a controversial decision, I don't know, but there it is. Because honestly, I've seen this movie before. I mean, I was around in the late 1990s, early 2000s when, the web arose and everybody was talking about the web. And I was working in the magazine industry, and all the people that worked at the .com were sort of like the, less talented stepchildren of the publishing industry. Sort of like that's where you went if you just weren't really good enough to get a job in regular magazine publishing. At least that's the way we thought of it at the snobby hallways of Condé Nast, et cetera. Well, man, were we wrong about that. That is a mistake I am not going to be making again. AI is here to stay. It is not going anywhere. The government might put some regulations on it, but my goodness, that train left the station a long time ago, and you better jump on board or you are going to be really left behind. People ask me a lot, do you think AI will replace writers? And I didn't have a really good answer for that because I still don't think it will replace writers. I still think AI needs humans. You need to work with it. It on its own, it's a disaster. But there was a quote that I read from a guy named Brian David Johnson. He says, AI is not taking your job. It is a human who is using the AI who is taking your job. So AI in itself is not the threat, but we need to understand how to work with AI. And so to get us started thinking about this topic, I have invited onto the show a guy by the name of Christoper S. Penn. And Christopher has been working with AI since 2013, a full decade before most of us had even heard of generative AI. He is the co-founder and chief data scientist of Trust Insights, and he has been at the forefront of integrating AI into marketing strategies for brands like Cisco Systems, T-Mobile, and McDonald's. But I first heard about Christopher from his amazing Substack newsletter, which is called Almost Timely Newsletter. It's also his website. And in that newsletter, he gives his really interesting and prescient insights into current trends in AI and tips on how to work with AI. He is really great at making something that's pretty complicated much simpler and putting it into layman's terms. So on this episode, we talk about the history and evolution of AI, how large language models work, and that's what ChatGPT is, a large language model, LLM, the importance of prompts. If you want to learn how to be better at prompting AI, listen to this episode. He talked about his RAPPEL framework, which is RAPPEL. He'll explain to you what that means. The different AI tools and what they're good for and what they're not so good for. We talk about the ethical and legal issues around AI, how AI will impact your writing in the future, and then ultimately how to use AI in your content creation strategy as a collaborator. I hope to address this topic a few times this year, as I think it's really important. And again, my goal here is to just give you the tips and the tools you need to work efficiently and creatively with AI. As Christopher puts it, AI is like having a really smart, almost free intern who is very game to do anything you ask it to do, has a tremendous amount of energy and passion. It just needs to be told what to do. And so hopefully together we can learn how to best get this intern on the right track. All right. So without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Mr. Christoper S. Penn. Well, Christoper Penn, welcome to the Right About Now podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you on. I think you are going to be illuminating some very pressing questions for my listeners who have kind of newly stumbled on to generative AI. I think a lot of people, 2 years ago, if you asked them what ChatGPT is, they would have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. And now it is like a center part of their life. It's amazing how quickly this technology has infiltrated our lives. And tell us a little bit about yourself, because you have been following the comings and goings of AI for years and years and years. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and when you sort of first started investigating artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI?
Sure. So my background originally was in IT. That was asking what my master's degree is in. And then in 2012, I started working at a PR firm, but one of the challenges we were facing was measuring the effect of PR, and traditional analytics techniques, which is what I've been known for at that point, were not doing the job. So I started looking at more advanced techniques and stumbled into an area called machine learning, in which we started doing things like uplift modeling, saying, okay, here's all the activity that's happening in the data. Then if you can discount what's already happening, whatever's left over would be the impact of the thing that you're trying to test, which required modeling, which required code and all sorts of things. And that machine learning falls under the bucket of what we now call artificial intelligence. AI itself is decades old. I mean, the discipline has been around since the 1950s, but the power to execute on it has been only in the last 20 years available to basically non-governments. The generative AI world really started in earnest in the mid 2010s. So 2015 is when I think you started getting diffuser models. 2017 is when you've got this architecture called transformers. Nothing to do with the 80s cartoon show.
No Optimus Prime. Yeah.
No Optimus Prime, no Megatron. The transformers model is different than anything that came before it, because there's been things like autocorrect and stuff for years. The transformers model is different because it takes into account everything that's happened in a conversation for the next prediction, which is a radical change. But you didn't see this in practice in functioning models until about 2020. And that's when OpenAI, the nascent OpenAI, released its GPT-2 model, which was barely coherent. Eleuthera AI, about a year later, released GPT-J6B, which was one of the first models that had a web interface, and it could generate coherent text, even though it was factually wrong 100% of the time.
It was always hallucinating. Okay.
Exactly. Always hallucinating. Then, and there's sort of three modes of these models, right? There's predict, instruct, and chat. Back then, there was only predict. So you would put in like half of a blog post, it could try to predict the other half, but it couldn't follow instructions at all. Instruct models came along later where you could give it an instruction and it would try to do it. And then they eventually evolved to what we call chat models, where you can have a conversation. Fast forward to November 22, that's when you get ChatGPT with OpenAI's GPT 3.5 Turbo model. And that is most people's introduction to this technology, but it's been around for about 7 years now.
And, you've hinted at it, this predictive model. I think I don't want to get too much into the weeds of this sort of science behind it. But I think what's important for people to understand a little bit about how it works, because if you understand a little bit how it works, you might be able to work with it in a little bit more of a collaborative way. So it seems like AI is thinking. Like when we interact with AI, it feels like it's making logical decisions, but it's not really thinking, right? That's not really how generative AI works. So explain to us this sort of predictive model, what you mean by that.
So the way these models are built is big companies with very deep pockets ingest enormous amounts of text. We're talking 10 trillion words or so, which as a visual, imagine a bookshelf filled with books that was only books made of text, no images, nothing else, that stretched around the equator of the planet twice. That's how much text a model needs to see to be able to understand the relationships between parts of words. And so when these companies make these things, they essentially digest down all of this language into these statistical databases. Imagine it this way. Every word that you say has a word cloud around it of words that frequently occur next to it. So for example, if you say, I pledge allegiance to the next word is flag fairly often, rutabaga much less. And so there's a statistical understanding in these models that if you were to predict the next word in that sentence, 99.9% of the time, it's going to be flag, right? If you are English, you would say God save the, and now you have a split distribution. Could be God save the queen or God save the king, depending on the period of time you're talking about. Either way, it's still not rutabaga. And so when you're writing prompts to these tools, every word in a prompt has an invisible word cloud around it. And where the word clouds overlap, that's when the model starts going, okay, I'm starting to understand what it is you're asking me to do. One of the things I say in my keynote talks, because I give keynote talks all around the planet on the topic, is the more relevant, specific words you put in a prompt, the better these tools will do. As an example, ChatGPT can hold about 90,000 words in its working memory. So you could put a book in as a prompt, right? You could put a 50,000 word business book in as a prompt, and it could handle that. Claude does about 150,000 words. Google Gemini, in fact, the brand new version that just came out literally an hour ago, 1.5 million words. If you think about it, the works of Shakespeare, all 38 plays, this is only 800,000 words, right? You could put 2 of these in as a prompt. And so when people are using these tools, they're like, oh yeah, you should be concise and brief in your prompts. No, you shouldn't. You should be relevant and specific, but you can put a lot of information into these tools, and the more relevant information you put in, the better.
Let's talk about what makes a good prompt, and how do you define a prompt? Is there a kind of a technical sort of, this is when you're telling ChatGPT or the generative AI, I keep saying ChatGPT when I'm a Claude guy, to be honest with you, but we'll talk about that in a second. But you keep telling Claude what you'd like, or what, you ask it questions. But what is a prompt?
A prompt is a set of instructions that you give to a generative AI tool. It is made of words, and it can be anything you can express in natural language.
And you have like a template that I think I've read of how to construct a prompt that would help people organize. So it's RACE, right? RAC. No, that's not yours.
Retire that one.
Oh, what's yours now? Well, tell me what your new one is.
It's called RAPPEL, like rappelling down a mountain.
Okay, so I'm going to
trustinsights.ai/rappel, RAPPEL. You can get a free PDF, no information required, no form to fill out.
Okay.
And it's 6 parts: role, action, prime, prompt, evaluate, learn. And I'll talk you through these steps. First thing is role. You tell the model who it is. You are a Pulitzer Prize winning author who specializes in B2B marketing, right? You typically write blog posts, social media content, long form content, etc. All of those are those keywords that help a model understand what the domain is. Second part is the action. Here's what you're going to do today. Today, we're going to write a blog post about best practices for account-based marketing. Before we do that, this is now step 3. What do you know about the topic of best practices for account-based marketing? What are some common mistakes that less experienced people make with account-based marketing? What are some expert tips and tricks that are less known about this? And then you have the model, then you pause and you hit go, and it will foam at the mouth and tell you everything it knows on the topic. This does 2 things. 1, it allows you to check the model's knowledge. Like, do you actually know what you're talking about? Because sometimes it doesn't. And 2, remember how I was talking about the attention framework in Transformers? Every word becomes a part of the next prompt. When you do a priming like this and you say, what do you know about this thing? All of the words that it spits out and everything you said become part of the next prompt. So it's not just having a conversation, it's loading up the model's memory, the working memory, with what it knows. So you don't have to type all 2,000 words about account-based marketing.
Right, because it will tell you what it already knows. So it's already in that chat now. So it's all kind of surfaced, right? It's in that thread.
So then once it's foamed them out, then you issue the prompt and you say, here's what you're gonna do. Here is the template I want you to follow. Here's the writing style I want you to follow. Whatever the thing is in the prompt itself, saying with the knowledge you've done, you've spit out, construct the blog post, the social post, the whatever. Let it do its thing. Then E is evaluate. Did it do what you told it to? Did it do things you didn't expect it to? If so, you have to then issue follow-up instructions. Hey, maybe make it a less formal tone, or maybe stop making everything a bullet point list. Like, I would like this to not be a listicle. And then the last step is the one that almost no one does, which is called learn. And you say, from everything that we've done today, convert this into system instructions for a large language model so that when I go to do this task again, I can copy and paste in a big set of instructions or put it into a gem or a GPT or a Claude project or whatever, so that you've got a proven methodology, almost like a piece of code that lets you jumpstart for subsequent tasks just like that one.
Right About Now is brought to you by AG1. This is a product I not only promote on my podcast, but when I use, it's like daily self-care for me, because I know that if I put it in my smoothie, I'm doing at least one good thing for my body that day. It's giving me lots of vitamins and minerals that I know I need. And AG1 contains prebiotics, probiotics, and gut-supporting ingredients, which really help support my digestion, and that keeps me regular. I'm going to be honest with you. So I really recommend AG1. You will notice a big difference yourself. And I've got a special offer for you. Try AG1 and get a free bottle of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to drinkag1.com/writeaboutnow. That's a $48 value for free if you go to drinkag1.com/writeaboutnow. Check it out now. First of all, let's just step back. I know you're a writer. Do you use it for your writing? I would imagine, of course, but how do you use it? Like, I know, for example, I heard that you write fan fiction.
So in my everyday writing, I use it in a couple different ways. Number one, I have a very long prompt for developmental editing, saying, as a developmental editor, what are the best practices and so on. What is a developmental editor? And then I'll take a piece of text and say, as a developmental editor, follow the best practices that we've gone through. tell me what I need to do with this piece to make it better. What did I forget? Where is it not coherent? Where the transitions need work? And it operates like an editor. It says, yeah, this part here sucks. This part here makes no sense. This is illogical. You got some grammar errors over here. So it is phenomenal at that. Second thing is I'd have it do a lot of synthesis. So I'm in the midst right now of the Trust Insights 2025 Marketing Trends Report. What I've done is I've extracted the last 90 days of conversations on Reddit from SEO and social media marketing, content marketing, all the different subreddits, and said, distill this down, summarize this down into the major points people are making, and then extrapolate from each of these corpuses is about 500,000 words. What are the obvious trends, right? AI is a thing. Like, yeah, no kidding. What are the less obvious trends? And what are the emerging trends that are only getting a couple mentions here and there, but could be a thing? And so this synthesis guide then is something that I will publish fully disclosing. This was made by Google Gemini. This was not written by me. This is machine made. For fiction writing, one of the things these tools are very good at is they can learn a style. You say, hey, here's my last 3 short fiction pieces I wrote. Analyze and explain the 20 different key factors in writing style, my diction, my spacing, my pacing, etc. And it will spit out a long analysis of your writing style. That becomes part of the prompt. Say, I want you to do a first draft of this story. Here's my idea. It's a Hallmark movie, but with serial killers, right? And have it do the 3-act outline. And then say, here's my writing style. And now let's create this. And oh, by the way, it should use these words. It shouldn't use these words. And I want it to sound like this. And I want this plot twist. And so as a creator, you're not just sitting back saying, AI, write me a story, right? You have to be an active participant. All the ideas have to come from you, the human, because machines are going to do high probability stuff. And what makes writing interesting is the low probability stuff that comes out of your brain, like a Hallmark movie but with serial killers.
It wouldn't like AI wouldn't necessarily come up with that unless you gave it a very detailed prompt that you wanted, counterintuitive, like the last, that's interesting. But to you, this is where we get into this question, because I teach AI as well and writing with AI. And, one of the questions I always get from sort of newbies is like, is that plagiarism? Is that ethical? What is your take on that? Like, if you're right, like if you're doing all the behind the scenes work and the prompting and AI is spitting out the writing part, is that still you writing or is that the machine writing? And what's the line there?
Okay, so there's a bunch of things to unpack in there. Plagiarism is the direct lifting of someone else's words or ideas, right? So if you're providing the ideas, no, by definition, you are not committing plagiarism. Now, it's important from a legal perspective in all but 5 places on Earth. AI generated content cannot be copyrighted. So if you're using it for original works, don't do that, right? Your fingers must be on the keyboard for the final product. You can use it for ideation, but you cannot use it for the final product and be able to retain copyright. In my case, fan fiction is a violation of copyright anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? You can never ever claim ownership of it. Is it ethical? Is a very big question. And it's a very big question that breaks out into 3 different branches, and it depends on your definition of ethics. There's 3 branches of ethics. Deontology, which says the rules are inherently good, and therefore anything that follows the rules is good. There's virtue ethics, which says that people are inherently good or evil or whatever. And so whatever the person does, if they are a good person, is inherent. And then there's consequentialism, which says the outcome is what matters. If the outcome does more harm than good, it's bad. If the outcome does more good than harm, it's good, regardless of the rules, etc. If you think about like D&D charts, you have like lawful and neutral and chaotic. Consequentialism is kind of on the chaotic side, and deontology is on the and virtue tend to be on the lawful side. Is the use of AI in writing ethical? Depends on your ethics. In general, and this is a broad statement. It's going to irritate some people, but in general, the reader doesn't care. The reader doesn't care. People in general don't care about ethics. You can see this by the results around the world of various elections, right? So no one really cares, except that there's an people want to be the hero of their own story. And so if you view yourself as ethical, then it helps reinforce the concept that you are the hero of your story. The application of ethics is wildly variable. Now, for a writer, is generative AI trained on other people's work without their consent? Yes, there is absolutely no question about that. There's zero question about that. Is that a violation of their intellectual property rights? Big question mark. It is unsettled in law in most places in the world. In the EU, it is settled in legislation saying that it is an infringement on rights. In China and Japan, the opposite is true. AI models under the law, they are considered transformative works. You open up the model, it's a bunch of statistics that does not in any way resemble the original works. Therefore, it is not an infringement. In the US, unclear. There's a bunch of lawsuits, but according to Crystal Laser, who's a professor of law at Cleveland State University, it's going to take 10 years for all this to work its way through the court system before we have an answer whether it is settled law. There are some models in some places where the model legally uses approved content. For example, Meta's models. Meta has said, hey, we've taken every piece of public information you've ever given us since 2007, and we've trained our models on it. And you signed the terms of service that said we can do whatever we want with the content you give to our service. Therefore, legally, we are in the right with our models. OpenAI cannot say that for ChatGPT. Google with its Gemini model is like, hey, you gave us the right to do all this stuff that we've been collecting data on for 25 years now. So our models are legally clear. You can debate whether it is ethical and whether it is moral. That some creators will say, like, it is coercive consent because we have, like visual artists will say, we have to use Instagram to promote our works. But in doing so, we have to sign away our rights.
So let's talk about the different, there's so many different AI platforms or services. I was told, I don't know, early on that, if you're a writer, you want, there's certain ones there's certain platforms. I don't know what they're called. They call platforms, or there's certain, what do you call it? You call them?
Well, so there's distinctions there. There are platforms or services like ChatGPT, but then within those, there are different models. So ChatGPT, you have a drop down that says, do you want to use O1? Do you want to use O1 Mini? Do you want to use GPT-4o? Go to Anthropic Claude. And Claude says, do you want to use 3.5 Sonnet, Haiku, Opus, etc.? So those are all models.
Okay, so let's talk about the models. For a writer, and maybe it's different for different writers. Let's say you are a writer of, nonfiction, you're a journalist, basically, and you want to work with one of these models more regularly. Is there one that you would recommend? I mean, what is the difference between like a Claude and a ChatGPT and a Gemini, really?
The difference gets smaller and smaller every iteration because each model keeps getting more and more capable. Claude, the Sonnet model, tends to be a decent writer out of the box with less great prompts, right? So if you're not very good at prompting, it will still tend to deliver better results. O1 from ChatGPT in OpenAI's ChatGPT is very good at reasoning. It's a terrible writer because of the way that it works. Behind the scenes, it's doing a lot of things like chain of thought and reflection and reward function, very technical stuff that tends to make its writing very robotic because it's choosing only the most high probability answers, and good writing is low probability. Gemini wildly depends on which version of Gemini and where you're using it, because Google, in its infinite product naming, names everything Gemini, and you're not sure which version you're using. If you're using it in AI Studio, which is the developer interface, Gemini Pro tends to be a pretty decent writer, but you have to be very clear with your writing style instructions. And there's over 1 million models on Hugging Face, sort of the app store of AI, that you can download and run yourself on your own computer if your computer's big enough. For example, there's one model called Cydonia that is a phenomenal fiction writer. It's very creative. It can do all sorts of writing, including writing that services will not let you do. So if you write like NSFW writing, Most of the services will not let you, but a model like Cydonia will. However, Cydonia is also dumb as a bag of hammers at anything except writing.
Okay. So you wouldn't want to tell it to research anything. Or,
No.
Yeah. No. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. This is called Hugging Face. This is an app store for models. And you have to be sort of a code guy to be able to go, or are these really out of the box, like ready for consumer type of?
It's kind of halfway in between. You need an app to run the model. A model is like an engine. You don't drive down the road sitting on an engine block. You drive down the road in a car. So you need the rest of the car. But there are really good free tools. Anything LLM is good. LM Studio is good. And these are all free open source products. You have to download those apps on your computer, assuming your computer has the horsepower to run them. And then you can choose a model and run it. Generally speaking, if your computer can play like a AAA title video game like Call of Duty at full screen and full resolution with all the bells and whistles turned on, then you can use generative AI models. If your computer can't even play solitaire, you can't run a model.
Time to get a new computer, maybe.
Exactly.
Let's talk real quick about research. Anybody who's worked a lot with AI knows that AI can hallucinate, it can make up facts, and so that scares, as a journalist, as I sort of spend half my time writing fiction and half my time writing nonfiction. But one of my go-to research platforms is Perplexity.ai. And I don't know if that's old school, like if we've gotten more modern than that. What do you, I know you do some really serious research, but what would you recommend for kind of the newer, maybe journalist who doesn't have time to maybe do a huge deep dive into all the different platforms? Is Perplexity.ai a good place to start in terms of getting good research?
It depends on the kind of research you're doing. So if you're just looking for stuff, good old Google search is still the king of the hill. If you're looking for being able to prompt something with very detailed requirements, like I want to see peer-reviewed academic papers on SARS-CoV-2 that specifically talk about the protein spike and the open reading frame N132A, you can give that to Perplexity and it will do a better job of interpreting and finding that. Perplexity's results in terms of what it says on screen tend to be garbage, but the sources it finds, it's really good at finding the sources. If you are doing something that is high risk and you cannot afford hallucination, a free tool like Google's Notebook LM is excellent, but you have to provide the data. So you would download the research papers or the academic papers or the books, whatever. You load them into Notebook LM and you say, now I'm going to ask questions here. And one of the things that's nice about a tool like Notebook LM is it will say, hey, you asked me a question that isn't in the data, so I can't answer it. It won't make it up. It'll say, I don't have that information.
Yeah, because sometimes some of these generative AI platforms they'll just make up the answer, which is crazy. You'll be like, give me 10 books that on this topic, and then it'll make up books like that don't even exist. And you're like, how the hell, so that's upsetting. Okay. So, and then some of them, I think for journalists, especially if you're writing like a breaking news type of journalist, some of these they're dated, right? Like they're like, I'm sorry, my engine stopped, ingesting information in March of last year. So what are some that are more up to date with, like, if you were, say, wanting to do a story on like, the shooter, the guy who shot the United Healthcare, Luigi Mangione, and that's a breaking news story, so you'd want to be up on what's going on. What search engine aside from Google is good for that?
You're looking for what's called grounding, right? So Google's AI tools are all grounded in Google search. ChatGPT has its new search tools that it will go out and use traditional search. It uses Bing as its back-end engine for getting that knowledge. Those would be good ones to use. Perplexity is hit or miss depending on currentness. Claude has no external connection, so its knowledge base is locked as to when the model was last refreshed. So you're looking for tools that have good grounding. Honestly, Google's Gemini is pretty good.
Yeah. And it seems like, and if you want to really get the most out of these platforms, these different models, it helps to pay for some of them, right? Like a lot, all of them offer some sort of service for free. But what happens when you actually pay? Are you now getting more access to more information? Like, why is it advantageous to pay?
It's advantageous to pay because you typically get access to better models or higher usage limits. All of these tools have usage limits because they are computationally very, very costly. They consume enormous amounts of energy. And actually, depending on the data center it's running in, they may consume a lot of fresh water as well. And so you would typically want to pay for the tool that best aligns with your uses. So if you were doing a lot of writing, particularly mirroring a writing style, it's probably worth paying for Anthropic's Claude, right? Because it tends to be the easiest for the non-technical person who doesn't want to spend a lot of time prompt engineering to get good writing out of it. If you want to be doing a lot of stuff with a lot of different flexibility, ChatGPT, the regular plus plan is worth paying for it. With the $20 a month plan, you even get access to their new Sora video model. You can make up to 50 videos a month. They're shockingly good. Yeah. They're like this is going to cause problems good. If you are dealing with large data sets, we're talking hundreds of thousands of words. Google's Gemini is worth paying for because it is capable of handling much larger data sets than any other model.
Have you worked a lot with like platforms like Lex? And have you heard about Lex?
I'm familiar with like Lex and Writer and Jasper and Copy AI and all these different companies. And they are good for enterprises where you need to have some standardization and you need to enforce it on people. So you can sort of lock people into certain ways of doing things or have some extra process management around AI. But there's nothing that any of those tools can do natively that you can't do with a foundation model like ChatGPT or Gemini.
Exactly. So you just have to, it's just about the prompts. It's like Lex will summarize stuff for you and it's interesting. And it will, I like that it does checks. Like it'll do like, okay, I want you to do a cliche check. I want you to do a transitions check. But you could also, like you said, prompt ChatGPT or Claude to do those things.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So one of the things I do, for example, when I'm writing code is I will say to a model, make a checklist of all the current functionality in my code, then make the changes, and then review the checklist to make sure you didn't remove anything that is important to the code functioning. And so it goes back to its checklist and says, oh yeah, I deleted that. Sorry.
Well, the other thing that AI gets a bad rap, and rightly so, for using a lot of the same words, a lot of the same structures of sentences. I mean, I can usually tell when something is written by AI, certainly by a novice who is not a good prompter, because it'll use words like delve and it'll use words like in a world. And there's like these, I wrote an article about this last month about how I can tell right away because it uses these compound sentences. Like it's never one thing with AI for some reason. It's always like the something and the something. And that's probably part of the predictive nature of the way it's built. It doesn't want to give you just one answer unless you tell it to give you one answer.
It is probability based. So if you're saying, write me a blog post about account-based marketing, you're going to invoke a whole corpus of text. And guess who uses words like delve? Marketers.
Yeah, it loves to. Yeah, it definitely feels like it's been programmed by the marketing department at Nike, because it's a lot of like, your journey, and it's all, those kinds of words. But how do you get it to avoid using those words? I mean, you have to just be very specific. I mean, should you have a list of words that you don't want it to use?
You can do that. However, what's fundamentally happening is that you are dealing with statistical distributions of words, right? So if you're writing about account-based marketing, there's going to be a whole bunch of writing styles that all sound pretty much the same because all the account-based marketing ads all sound pretty much the same. So the way you route around that is you instruct it to use words that are out of distribution. So you might say, we're going to write a blog post about account-based marketing. It's going to have this framework, this things. You must use the following 3 words in the blog post: banana, rifle, rotary, engine, and peanut. Those words are so far out of the distribution for all the other account-based marketing copy that's ever been written that when you require the model to use that, it has to go through an entirely different set of words and an entirely different set of vocabularies, and it will create very different text. There's another system called Tree of Thought, where one of the things you can do is, and I did this recently, actually, I turned this into a podcast. You can have a model simulate 2 different personalities, and you give them very extreme personalities and say, argue with each other. And as the 2 personalities argue in a chat, they create very different language. You say, this person over here is unhinged. They're a conspiracy theorist or whatever. And by very nature of simulating personalities, you're going to get a different distribution of language.
It's obviously the technology it's only as good as the person that's prompting it and programming it. So, often I'm asked, or there's a lot of concern, obviously, in writing sets is this technology going to replace us? And what is your take on that? I mean, I feel like it's kind of a complicated answer because it's not going to necessarily replace you, but if you don't know how to use it, you could be replaced, right? In some positions.
So here's the challenging answer. Yes, some people are going to lose out work, particularly gig writers, people who write blog posts for corporations. That work is endangered. If you think of AI tools as having a level of quality, right? 3 years ago, the level of quality was abysmal. 3 years ago is crap. 2 years ago, mediocre. Last year was okay. This year it's good. Next year it's pretty good. At every tier, there are also humans, right? There are crap writers, right? People who are like face rolling on the keyboard. You get that in the spam emails that you get. But as the capabilities of machines go up, those writers who are under that bar of quality will see their income and their livelihood be reduced substantially. So it is incumbent upon the human to keep pace or exceed the skills of the machines and to be so specialized in the way that you do things that people want your particular brand. Think about it like any commodity, right? There is no shortage of hot sauces on the shelf, right? That you go to the supermarket, there's like shelves and shelves of hot sauces, but there's a brand you like. Your job as a creator, as a professional, is to create a brand that people like, that they say, you know what? I can get a cheaper hot sauce that's probably almost as good, but I really like this brand. And so as a creator, we have to be thinking, what is unique to our brand that you can't get anywhere else? And yes, a machine can emulate it, but that's an emulation of style. It's not an emulation of the knowledge that you have in your head. If you're a fiction writer, if you're writing, pulp fiction paperbacks, boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, and so on and so forth. Yeah, machines can do that really well. If you're writing something that is so niche that no one else will bother to write it, and machines haven't seen enough examples of it, then you have a sustainable place for you to stand.
Okay. So it like anything, it's always about authenticity and having originality. And so it's just sort of like, what's the real difference between a human and AI? It's like you bring your own personal, authentic spin to your writing, and hopefully AI, it might be able to simulate it, but it can never be you.
It can't be you. Now, here's the flip side of the coin. Does your audience value all of you or just a part of you? And if they value the part of you that machines can simulate well, then you have a problem. And so as a creator, you need to be focused on three things. Number one, you need to be known by the machines. So you need to be out there. You need to be published. You need to have knowledge so that people, when they are having a conversation with ChatGPT and they say, hey, recommend me a lesbian romance writer, they will come up with your name. Two, you need to have a direct method of communication with your audience that is not intermediated by someone else's AI. So that means you need to have an email newsletter. You need to have a text messaging list. You need something that lets you stay in touch with people directly, because the whole Kevin Kelly 1,000 true fans thing has never been more true. And three, you need a community, a place where people who are your fans can directly interact, a Discord server, a Slack instance, some place that, again, is away from other people's AI, that is where you can stay in touch with those fans. Discord is the best place I would say, for any creator to start, because it's cheap or free and very, very full featured. If you do that, you are doubling down on what people really want, which is a connection to you, the creator, and not the output of you. And that provides you some buffer against AI.
I mean, I just wonder, like today, if a writer like Shakespeare or, I don't know, F. Scott Fitzgerald, if they didn't do all these things that you're talking about, whether their books would have, like, would just the power of their books shine through, or do you need to have this other layer now?
You absolutely need to have these other layers now because the media landscape is wildly different.
Yeah. It's sobering to know this, but but to not know it is sort of at your own peril. It's not just about the quality of the writing anymore. But
Exactly.
It sounds tiring. You know, like, look, I do this. I have a Substack. I have all the socials, etc. I don't have a Discord, which I'm going to start a Discord as soon as I get off the call with you. But, you know, it's very labor intensive to create that much content, right? All the time.
Yes.
So not only are you creating the content, the original content, like I have a book, you know, but then you've got all the other stuff you got. So how does one person do this? They use AI? I mean,
You do when you can, and you hire as soon as you can, hire some help, some human help, because some of the stuff just requires people. And you make decisions based on where your audience is. You don't have to be on every channel. You have to be on the channels where your audience is. So if you don't know who your audience is and where they spend their time, you're in trouble.
What would be your recommendation for using maybe AI to figure out where your audience is?
You don't. You
don't.
Email your audience and you say, where do you spend your time?
Okay. So you actually just talk to the humans. You interact.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to. All right. Tell me about what you're up to now. Like, how can people follow you, know more about you? What's on your, like, what you're a person that does a lot of different things. So tell me a little bit about that.
So the easiest way to find me is my company's website, trustinsights.ai. And then if you want to follow my personal stuff is at ChristopherSpenn.com.
Okay. And then you have a newsletter.
I do, which is on my website.
And what have you found as the most effective way of all the different ways to communicate with your audience?
Email newsletter, 100%. My newsletter is hosted on Substack, but is mirrored on my website. The list has grown crazily. It's 275,000 subscribers now to a weekly newsletter, and it is by far the best way to reach people.
And why do you think that is? Because
people who subscribe to the newsletter are there for a very specific purpose. I fulfill that purpose, and it's on their time, and it's the way they want it. If I post something to social media, it's gone in 60 seconds, right? You got to be like living on there. If I send you an email, you could let that sit in your inbox for 3 weeks, and then you consume it when you want.
And obviously, this is, again, you know your audience. So you don't maybe necessarily have an audience that's a TikTok audience or something. Like, you have an audience that is willing to sit down and read a newsletter and gather information. It's a different audience, maybe.
It is, but I also provide 3 modalities. So every newsletter, I read it aloud, and I make that available as an MP3, as a podcast, and I put it up on YouTube because I record the video of me reading it aloud. And so when I did a survey years ago, and people said about 20% wanted a video format, 20% wanted audio format, and 60% wanted in written format. And so it would be stupid of me to only offer written. I'd piss off 40% of my audience. So I give people the content in the formats that they want, and then I retain those people.
When you come up with subject matter for your email blasts, how do you come up with that? Do you ever use the tools we've been talking about to brainstorm ideas?
No, it's usually whatever has pissed me off that week for something dumb someone has said on LinkedIn.
Okay. So it's more about like your own personal, you're not using the tools, but do you use the tools to help you write those scribe? No.
Again, it's usually something I know pretty well.
Yeah.
And
so
someone will say something dumb, and I'm like, I'm going to do a whole issue on this.
I better not say anything dumb in this call. I mean, well, maybe I should, and then I can end up on your emails and get a lot of publicity. All right. Well, Christoper Penn, it's been incredibly illuminating. I have now a list of things. Thank you for giving me a list of things I have to do as soon as I hang up with you. Thank you for joining, and good luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Right About Now, hosted by my dad, Jonathan Small. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to his podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you may find podcasts. Or you can go to his website, rightaboutnowmedia.com, and listen there. This is Ella, reminding you to do the right Sing!
Thanks, Ella.
You're welcome.
Perfect.